One of the biggest mistakes that I see teachers make during the first week of school is jumping right into the curriculum instead of giving kids a soft start to the year. That first week should really be about teaching routines and building your classroom community. You're going to have plenty of time for curriculum later on down the road. So today we're talking about how to set up for the first week of school, what activities to do, and which routines are the most important while still making it fun for the kids. So let's go. The first week of school can be overwhelming no matter what grade you teach. But when you're a kindergarten or first grade teacher, it's extra stressful. You're dealing with kids who are often brand new to school and that, need a lot of hand-holding those first few weeks. So let's break it down day by day with exactly what you can do Monday through Friday of that first week of school. And don't worry, you don't need elaborate lesson plans. Every activity that I'm going to share today is simple, low prep, but they also teach some things that are really important for the beginning of the year. You want to keep every day very simple because your kids are going to need lots of breaks that first week. The first day of school is all about making kids feel comfortable and happy to be at school. You're going to want to greet them at the door and help them get settled, show them where to put their things, how to sign in for lunch, and where they can use the restroom. When you meet at the carpet, talk to them about how you expect them to walk to the carpet, where to sit, and how to keep their hands and feet to themselves. And every day, we'd start with a short morning meeting. It really helped the kids get comfortable talking with each other, and it just sort of became a routine that they expected, and it set the tone for the day. And then we'd move into our activities that we were going to do that day. I like to start our first day with a read aloud, and my favorite one was First Day Jitters by Julie Danneberg. We would use this book to talk about how we felt about coming to school, and we'd do a little writing activity, and we always made jitter juice to take away our worries. Last week, I actually did an episode all about the first day of school and all the activities that we did with the book, and also all the different routines that you should introduce on the first day. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here since I have an entire episode just devoted to that first day of school, but I'll link that below so that you can watch that next. On the second day of school, you're going to want to start building your classroom community. A lot of kids come to school and they may have friends in class from the year before, or maybe their soccer team or something. But lots of kids don't know a single person, and they feel worried about having no friends to play with on the playground or nobody to sit with at lunch. So day 2 is all about making friends. We would start our day by reading a book called Stick and Stone by Beth Ferry. It's a cute little book about a little stick and a stone. They are friends and they stand up to a bully and they always stay together in sticky situations. So after reading the story, I'd have the kids partner up with a brand new friend. I had a little cup of sticks that were numbered 1 through 10 and a little cup of stones numbered 1 through 10. And each kid would choose either a stick or a stone, and then they'd find the person with the matching number, and that would be their partner for the day. I set up 4 friendship stations around the room, and the kids would visit the stations with their partner. So at station 1, they made friendship bracelets. And at station 2, that one was called Find a Friend. And at this one, they had a little worksheet. And they would go around and try to find other kids in the room that liked things that were on the sheet, like playing video games or riding bikes or going swimming, stuff like that. So it gave the kids the chance to meet other kids in the room and find out things that they like to do too. And then at station 3, they played a friendship memory game. All the cards in the game had kids working and playing together, doing different things. So again, it gave them a chance to talk about stuff like, oh, I like to play Barbies too, or, whatever. And then the last station was where they painted kindness rocks. I just had a big tray of rocks that I got at a craft store, and the kids could paint them however they wanted. And then when they dried later in the afternoon, we hid them on the playground for the other classes to find. So that was a great way to not only make friends in our own room, but also to start making friends with kids in the other classrooms as well. We ended our day by making friendship soup, which was basically a bunch of different dry cereals all mixed together, and then we poured them into a big bowl. I told the kids that the big bowl represented our classroom and that each ingredient in the soup represented the building blocks that we needed to have a great year at school. And so we followed our little friendship soup recipe and we added ingredients like fun and respect and doing our best work, stuff like that. And then as we added the ingredients, we would talk about different situations that might happen over the school year. We talked about how, sometimes we might get angry or sad. And we talked a little bit about peer pressure and how true friends stick beside each other, just like Stick and Stone did in the book. And so then after we added all the ingredients, the word that it spelled out from our recipe card was friends. And it actually ended up becoming one of the activities that the kids remembered all year. They really loved those stations and making the soup. So your second day of school can really set the tone for the kind of classroom community that you're building. Which, by the way, everything I'm sharing today, from the friendship stations and the writing activities, all the stuff, it's all included in my first week of school bundle. So if you don't want to create it yourself, I'll link it below. All right, by the third day of school, it's time to start talking a little bit about your classroom rules. The honeymoon period is probably starting to wear off and the kids are going to start to show their true colors by this time. So a great book to read is David Goes to School by David Shannon. If you're not familiar with this little character, David is a little rascal that's always getting himself into trouble in all of the David Shannon books. And in this one, David is pretty much doing all the things that he shouldn't do in school. So it's a great book to read when you want to talk about your classroom rules. So in our room, after we read the story, we'd talk about the stuff that David did and why it was naughty. And then we'd make our class no-nos. It was a very simple anchor chart because I wanted the kids to get their first experience with interactive writing, which, if you've never heard of that, is when kids share the pen with the teacher and help create the anchor chart. So we would talk about the things that we didn't want to see happening in our class, and then I would call on different kids to help me write the word no, and then I would finish the sentence. So we wrote things like no hitting or no talking at the carpet, stuff like that. And then when we were done, the kids would make a little David craft and we hung it up in our classroom. It made a cute little bulletin board for back to school. And actually, I prefer writing classroom rules in more positive language. So later on, I'd make our permanent classroom rules chart. And we usually had 5 basic rules that would cover just about any offense. And I'd always number our rules and I wrote them in different colors so that if somebody was struggling, with their behavior, I could say, remember rule number 1 or remember the blue rule. It just kind of helped kids begin to put those rules in their minds so that they could remember them. I mean, it's such a tiny thing, but it made those corrections so much easier. All right, moving on to day 4. This was the day that we would talk about school bus safety. Most of the kids in our school rode the bus to school, and a lot of them had to wait at a bus stop. So it was important to teach them how to stay safe both on and off the bus. I used to read a book called 10 Rules You Must Not Break If You Want to Survive the School Bus by John Granditz. And it was really the perfect book to read, but honestly, it's kind of long, and sometimes I'd lose the kids' attention before the end of the book. And I've searched and searched for books about school bus rules, and I've never really found a book I liked. But there's actually a bunch of videos on YouTube that are pretty good, so I'll link some of those down below, and you could show one of those to your kids. So after we kind of learned a little bit about school bus safety, we would work together to make a Venn diagram with some of the rules that we thought would be good to follow on the bus. And we'd do a little pocket chart sorting activity where the kids sorted picture cards of things that were safe and unsafe to do on the bus. And then we'd make a very simple little school bus rules anchor chart. We'd hang that by the door that we went out for dismissal, and we'd review it for, about a week or so every day before we left so that the kids remembered exactly what to do and not to do on the bus. I'd also had the kids do a really simple little writing activity where they had to draw a picture of the bus, and then they would write one rule that they were going to follow on the bus, and then we made a little school bus craft to go with it. So this brings us to our last day of the week. And this day was about one thing that just about every single kid was proud to show off, and that was their new school shoes. That's a pretty standard thing to get when kids are going back to school, so I would sort of capitalize on their excitement. We'd read the book Pete the Cat, Rocking in My School Shoes, and then we'd make a list of all the cool things that we could do in our new shoes. we'd make a big chart that said, what can you do in your new school shoes? And then I had a list of sentence starters listed down the side of the chart that said, I like to blank. And then we'd practice shared writing again, and I'd call on about 5 or 6 different kids to come up and tell me one thing that they liked to do in their shoes. And they'd write that word on the chart. So they'd fill in the sentence with words like, I like to run or jump or play, stuff like that. And without even realizing it, they were giving me my very first informal writing assessment. Doing these types of simple shared writing activities during that first week are really great because they can give you a glimpse into the kids and where they are with their reading and their writing. Can they sound out words and write some of their letters? Are some kids really great at letter formation? Are there other kids that have no idea how to hold a pencil or even write a letter? Can they hear the beginning sounds in a word? You're going to see all of that when you do these shared writing activities. So you want to call on different kids every day to just sort of observe their skill level, because it's really going to help you when you start planning your reading and your writing lessons for the next week. So if you want to try these first week of school activities with your class, they're all a part of my first week bundle on TPT, and I'll link that below. So now you know exactly what to do the first week of school, and the next step is making sure that your classroom is organized for success. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about next week. So be sure and come back for that. And until then, remember to make learning feel like play. See you soon.